Mali, known for its mud brick buildings, also hosts the growing city of Bamako, and rapid modernization threatens the distinct architectural profile of the capital.
Sustaining HIV response in Nigeria. President Muhammadu Buhari launches the HIV Trust Fund, promising to keep health interventions a national priority while encouraging private sector-led initiatives. Hello, thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Chamberlain Osoa, Channels Television here in Lagos. I'm joined by Vincent Makori from Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks, I'm Vincent Makori at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Now let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Chamberlain Osoa in Lagos brings you that story.
Nigeria has launched a 62.1 billion naira fund as part of measures towards sustaining HIV response, as well as address killer diseases and public health emergencies. President Muhammadu Buhari, who launched the HIV Trust Fund, promises to continue to prioritize health interventions. He's also hoping that the private sector-led initiative will surpass the target in the next 5 years. Our State House correspondent, Gloria Umuzuki, reports.
The president's call for renewed global action to end the HIV/AIDS pandemic has undoubtedly generated renewed responses across the board. Luminaries of Nigeria's private sector, including Africa's richest businessman, Alhaji Aliko Dangote, among others, converge on the State House for the launch of a 62.1 billion naira trust fund to expand domestic investments in HIV epidemic control.
We have continued to make good our commitment of placing more people living with HIV on treatment annually using national resources. However, strong domestic resources mobilization with an enduring partnership and shared responsibility is required to sustain the response to HIV and other emerging public health emergencies. I hope the HIV Trust Fund of Nigeria will galvanize more of the private sector and others partners to surpass the target of 62 billion naira in the next 5 years.
Currently, a total of 1.7 million Nigerians are living with HIV, while 1.6 million of that figure are on treatment.
Our national coverage of prevention of mother-to-child transmission is less than 50%, leading to about 22,000 cases of new mother-to-child transmission of HIV every year in the country. Securing a financing mechanism to guarantee a generation of HIV-free babies is the basis of today's launch.
The NACA DG concludes that Nigeria is on a fast-track lane to control HIV by 2023, albeit international partners currently contributing about 80% of HIV funds agree that there is an urgent need to scale up domestic funding as Nigeria leads with the highest number of HIV infection among children.
The United States remains committed to supporting Nigeria in reaching and sustaining HIV epidemic control, but we also believe that national ownership is critical to its success. The next phase of our game plan is to sustain these gains by ensuring that funding gaps are filled to keep people living with HIV on treatment.
The United Nations had earlier asserted that the COVID-19 may push back progress on HIV by a decade, but also shares the optimism that crystallizing a domestic financing mechanism can halt the mother-to-child transmission of the virus by 2030. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umuzuki, Channels Television.
To discuss this intervention, we're joined by Dr. Akela Ishaku, who is a public health expert. Good to see you again, Dr. Ishaku. Could you tell us what kind of impact do you think this intervention will have on HIV response in the country?
Thank you for having me. I think this HIV Trust Fund will go a long way to have a very positive impact on the HIV menace situation in Nigeria. You will agree with me that 1 out of every 7 children being given birth to in the world are from Nigeria by HIV mothers. And it shows that based on the statistics that we have 52,000 children being given birth annually that from positive HIV mothers that become positive. You will also agree with me that because of COVID, there is shrink in terms of funding of HIV. So the positive impact that this trust fund will bring to bear to the table is that it will go a long way to reduce the mother-to-child transmission and also cut down positive transmission from new infection. 2, it will also close the gaps of funding. And I think that it is one of the very innovative initiatives in our healthcare system, bringing to bear the private sector driven initiative to actually drive. And my hope is that it will not only limit to HIV, but we'll have an infectious disease trust fund.
Well, we know that there are usually several considerations before, for these funds to be administered. So from your perspective, how should stakeholders go about disbursing this fund, perhaps to also help other public health emergencies?
Absolutely. So this is quite key and valid question that we need to actually address. The trust fund must not be, I'm glad that it has a board of directors coming in, people that are of vast experience. We must actually create a monitoring and evaluation mechanisms in terms of disbursing these resources. And it's not going to, it should be integrated based wise. This is because HIV is linked to other diseases. It's linked to diseases that are associated with poverty. It's linked to diseases such as tuberculosis and now COVID. So we must not address HIV in isolation with other diseases. So I may not know the framework, but I think health economics should be able to come up with a very robust framework that these resources will be disbursed. And we need a very strong monitor and evaluation M&E framework that can be able to track most of these funds that will be released.
Do you get the sense that we're paying requisite attention to all the issues that need this sort of attention or intervention?
Absolutely. With the coming of COVID, also with the sporadic cyclic seasonal outbreak of Lassa fever and cholera, you will discover that actually there was a paradigm shift focus from HIV. But with the coming of this trust fund, we expect that this will ignite activities such as interventional activities. It also activates research. One of the major components I have seen that we have not done much is actually in the aspect of research. So I expect that in the coming days to come, because of the rollout of this trust fund, we should be able to have a national HIV conference, a scientific conference every year, where we come to the round table to discuss interventions where we have failed, what are the learning experiences, and the way forward, where we can be able to close this gap. So I agree with you that because of COVID, because of other infectious diseases outbreak, we have not actually paid much attention to HIV and AIDS.
You've seen the way our budgeting system goes. Do you think that we need to have a second look at how we budget for the sector to address all of these challenges?
Absolutely. You can see that a very insignificant amount has been budgeted in the 2022 budget for the healthcare sector. And I felt like it is not quite good with the kind of amount that we'll have. Health, security, and education to take a large chunk of the percentage of our healthcare system. So with the coming of COVID, a lot of international donors intervention will shrink. We have seen that with PEFA, we have seen that with other health interventions. What we just need to do is to actually look at in-house, how we can be able to increase funding locally, and then also begin to open windows for private sector to come in and the corporate services from corporate organizations. Chamberlain, I'm expecting that telecoms industry, like the MTN, the Globacom, and the Airtel should be able to also intervene in healthcare sector through corporate services, just like what Dangote is doing. I also expect that we have banks also having a lot of interventions in the healthcare sector. It will go a long way in terms of upgrading our healthcare facilities. And I felt like banks can be able to do that. It's not all about declaring yearly profits by banks, but how does that translate to their corporate social responsibility in key areas, which I felt health should be one of their priorities.
All right, and Dr. Akiala Ishaku, public health expert, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
An estimated 16.6 million children in sub-Saharan Africa alone are forced into illegal labor, according to the UN. And despite being outlawed, advocates say child labor is on the rise. Globally, 1 in 10 children are now believed to be involved in some form of child labor. In this report from southern Burkina Faso, reporter Henry Wilkins looks at why child labor is such a persistent problem.
It's cotton harvest season in Burkina Faso. In this village in the country's south, everyone in the community turns out to bring in the white gold, as it's sometimes called. Men, women and children. Wendkuni and Wenjam, whose names have been changed to protect their identities, are 10 and 12. They fit school around their cotton harvesting duties.
I am 10 years old. When I get up in the morning, I go to school. When I come back, I go to the field to go to work. At school, we have a lot of work lessons. My favorite subjects are geography and science.
A report by UNICEF says that a 20-year downward trend in child labour globally has come to an end in recent years, and numbers are going up again. Experts say data was collected pre-COVID-19, and they predict that the pandemic might exacerbate the situation.
If I come to the field, I work. I work to remove the cotton. When I come here, I come with my father. I hope to own my own field when I'm older.
Wendkuni and Wenjam's parents cannot harvest all the cotton they grow themselves. And they say if the family is going to make enough money to eat, the children have to help. Child labour in Burkina Faso is illegal, but the law is difficult to enforce, and families that live in poverty do not have the resources to harvest cotton without the help of the children.
Many countries, although they've adopted good policies and laws, the ILO Convention on Worst Forms of Child Labor is universally ratified. They're facing headwinds in terms of lack of economic growth, inequality, persistent inequality, and continued, pervasive poverty.
Experts say cotton produced with child labour makes it into the international supply chain easily and can be found at all levels of the fashion industry. However, advocates say while this is difficult to stop, it is possible. Arisa, a human rights non-profit advocating for global rights, says brands need to ask questions about the origins of the cotton.
One thing is for brands definitely is transparency and knowing where their cotton comes from. Because if you don't know, if you have no clue where your cotton comes from, you also have no clue, whether there's child labor or not, and you can't research that.
Zwart says it's also important for consumers to ask questions. Wendkuni, meanwhile, says he wants to focus on his education. He says he loves school, and when he grows up, he hopes to be a teacher. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Southern Burkina Faso.
It's time now for a short break, and as we do, we'll remind you to visit our website, channelcv.com, for news and programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. Still to come, taking the lead in South Africa's canine hospitality industry, Super Wolf Dog Hotel Pamper Pups with posh retreats.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Mali is well known for its mud brick Sudano-Sahelian architecture, which is also seen in buildings in the capital Bamako, one of the fastest growing cities in Africa. But rapid modernization is also threatening the unique structures and the face of the city. Anne Riesenberg reports from Bamako.
Mali's National Arts Institute, INA, resides in one of Bamako's oldest Sudano-Sahelian buildings and has trained many of Mali's famous musicians and artists. But there are concerns that it could be razed for commercial development after an unknown businessman made a deal with the government to build a new campus outside the city in exchange for the arts building. Activists like Dama Diawara, who grew up playing under the building's pillars, have for months been holding sit-in protests and looking for answers.
The architecture that they built here, if you destroy it, it's like you destroyed all of Bamako before your eyes. You know what INA represents? And you want to destroy it? You're destroying Bamako itself.
The historic buildings are sometimes referred to as colonial because most were built before Mali's independence from France in 1960. Mali's National Directorate of Cultural Heritage, NDPC, under the Ministry of Culture, says they cannot be destroyed unless they are removed from its protected list. But Director Moulay Koulibaly says Bamako is lucky to still have much of its architectural heritage intact.
These colonial buildings are subject to modernization, subject to globalization, and subject to rapid urbanization. The pressure that comes with development weighs on these buildings.
Abdoulaye Dioko is an urban planner and founder of Bamako School of Engineering, Architecture, and Urbanism. He says that architecture in Mali has traditionally been adapted to the climate, culture, and geography. But as Bamako has grown at one of the fastest speeds in Africa, its distinct buildings have been replaced with modern concrete and steel structures.
In time, everything was destroyed because we didn't follow our ancestors in making sure we have our own architecture and developing it. It's also because there wasn't an architecture code. There wasn't research.
Despite his bleak assessment of Bamako's architectural past, Dioko says he's hopeful for its future. Since the city is still developing, he says there is time to focus on constructing new buildings in the Sudano-Sahelian style. In the meantime, activists say they will continue to speak out against the destruction of Mali's historic National Arts Institute. Annie Reisenberg for VOA News, Bamako, Mali.
An amazing activist and owner of a jewelry store, Ali Ben Talouba, is trying to make and sell amazing jewelry in an attempt to preserve his cultural heritage. He says what makes the ancient, amazing jewelry so special is that it's a lifetime investment.
Crafting delicate pieces of Amazi jewelry, Ali Ben Talouba's passion in life is to preserve the art that has been around for over a millennia. The Amazi activist, husband and father, makes bespoke pieces of jewelry in a style long overshadowed by more modern designs. With molds of ancient Berber carvings, the Tunisian jewelry maker spends hours in his workshop crafting Amazi jewelry from silver.
I am trying to encourage people towards Amazic jewelry, even with facilitating payments, in order to encourage them to own and preserve this jewelry. When a woman comes to me, I educate her about the importance of owning this jewelry, because it will remain in her name and live much longer than her, and 100 years after. They will remember the owner of a specific piece of jewelry.
Despite the decline of the industry over the past years, silver remains popular among Amazi women in Tunisia. At home, his wife, dressed in traditional clothing, says the couple take their two daughters to Berber events whenever they can to raise awareness about their heritage and sometimes speak the language at home as well.
We try to preserve our cultural heritage by passing it to our children. I always try to dress my daughters in this dress and take them to attend amazing events like the Amazing New Year. Also, I always try to preserve the language. We speak it sometimes at home so that they understand it and do not forget about it.
Ben Taluba aims to educate his clients about the value of this cultural heritage and encourage them to preserve it.
Superwolf Dog Hotel is taking the lead in canine hospitality in South Africa. Unlike other five-star hotels in Cape Town, dog owners believe Superwolf deserves a 6-star rating because of the care and luxury that dogs deserve. Take a look.
5 stars is usually the most luxury hotel one can get. A notable exception is Superwolf Dog Hotel in Cape Town, whose canine guests receive such pampering that owners says it deserves 6 stars.
Some of the key offerings we have is our splendid outdoor super sky deck. We've got a full table view mountain, the splash pool, not only AstroTurf but genuine grass as well, so the dogs have that natural feel, although it's in the city, so being a central offering. We've got our customized Superwolf lounges, which are absolutely delightful for the doggos. They really love sharing that space as a sleeping zone. Of course, we've got our handlers and staff on duty 24/7 to make sure that there's never ever a moment that a dog is being left unattended.
Nearly 3 decades since the end of the white minority rule, South Africa remains one of the world's most unequal countries, with half the country lying below the official poverty line.
Dogs are man's best friend for a reason, but other than that, they come from spaces where that's their regular day-to-day treatment, and I think more so now than ever, dogs are people's children, so they don't want to just be left at home to do nothing. They come here and get well spoiled, and just to make sure that at the end of the day they're knackered and happy when they go home.
For Watson, he believes in adopting his favorite dog.
I would choose all of them, but I will have to just go with Stevie. Stevie's fun. Stevie likes me a lot. Stevie, when he sees me, he goes crazy. So I adopted that. So yeah, he's one of my best.
Superwolf Hotel hopes to continue giving dogs luxury and treatment even amidst poverty.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. Channels7.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Chain Balanusa. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.